Dr. Miller with book club number 4 with a book from Dr. Yessis. If you're familiar with strength conditioning for a long period of time, you know Dr. Yessis' name. He was talks a lot about his books related to the old Soviet sports programs, strength conditioning programs. This is another book published by Ultimate Athlete Concepts, which has a nice collection of some of these authors from the Soviet sports era, Bondarchuk and Verkhoshansky and Cern, that have some of the information, the foundational training information we still use today. They were doing in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. So a lot of respect for Dr. Yessis. Never met Dr. Yessis, but he is a no-nonsense. I like his no-nonsense kind of approach to strength conditioning that's cut through the crap, and let's get to things that work. Now, he has this book, this 1x20. Okay, this was a popular form of training. It still is in some circles, especially at the higher levels. But this idea of doing 1x20 training, one set to true failure, like it's over, like you're done, you're cooked. And so that means, you can only do one set. If you're going to that kind of fatigue, you can only handle one set. Now, the way that the full development of the body is accomplished is by using a lot of exercises. So, up to 20 exercises in a workout, potentially one set to 20. Now, I'll go over some of the positives and negatives a little bit, but that's kind of the general structure. Now, one of the things I struggle with when I look at this book is trying to figure out the frequency. If you're doing 1x20, 20 rep exercise, you're probably not training very often if you really know how to push. If you don't know how to push real hard, you probably could do it more frequently. So that was one thing, looking at this book, maybe, I glossed over it or something, but I couldn't figure out how frequent you do this. Probably 2 times a week would be my guess, looking at the amount of volume and amount of fatigue that could be accrued. Maybe once would be enough, depending on where an athlete's in the season. So let's talk about the positives and negatives of this approach. And I bring this book up because it's an old HIIT, H-I-T, not H-I-I-I-T, like we talk about today, not high-intensity interval training as much as high-intensity training. And this was really popular in the 90s. A lot of big universities in the United States were using HIIT training. And then it kind of faded because what was we're figuring out is, we get these big, strong athletes, but they weren't very fast. The neurological component was being neglected. And that's one of the downsides of 1x20 training. You're only using one set to 20 repetitions of true failure. And so that rep range doesn't lend itself well to supporting I've released a video on the size principle of motor recruitment. It doesn't support the dynamic or maximal method very well. It's using the repetition method, the idea of climbing the size principle of motor recruitment through fatigue. But we know if you run and jump high, or if you run fast and jump high, you need more of a dynamic approach. So, and Dr. Yessis is honest about some of these limitations. He's not advocating 1x20 all the time. There's certainly a place for speed work, high velocity movements, right? Not just 1x20. He's not advocating those things. So be fair to him, he's not saying that. What he's saying, though, and I think the gist of the book is that this training, type of training, is 1x20 training, would be nice and a good idea. Let me put it that way. A better idea for the weight room, especially in relation to young athletes. And young being both training age and biological, I would say more so the biological age. That doesn't mean training, like you could have a master's athlete. This would be a great place to start as well. But I was thinking more biological age as I was reading this. So the positives of this training method. And by the way, I've never used it before in a formal fashion. I've used pieces of 1x20 or high volume sets, one set to one, type of work. But I've never used the 1x20 just because the 20 exercises is usually quite a bit. But it could fit in a program. And this is what I'm going to talk about now is the positives and negatives. So the negatives of let's start with the positives. Let's be a positive person. The positive of this program. 1x20, that repetition range is going to be enough stimulus, certainly, to see adaptation across a wide spectrum of physiological worlds. And Dr. Yessis points this out. Primarily, to me, as I'm reading this, is connective tissue maintenance. We don't spend enough time maintaining connective tissue. We just jump into heavy weights. The intensity is jacked up too fast. That's a mistake. In a good, periodized program, you'll have a high rep section before you jump into heavier loads. And so 1x20 certainly accomplishes that. High growth hormone levels in particular is going to stimulate positive changes in connective tissue. So we're talking about tendons here in particular, right? And the fascia that supports, runs through the tendon and the muscle and around and all those very important structures. Number 2, you are going to create some cardiovascular advantages. So you're going to build like capillary density. Again, these are things Dr. Yessis points out as well. You're going to build some capillary density. You're going to have some supportive structure for the muscle. you are going to get a bigger muscle. You are going to get more contractile proteins. I put out a video just recently about functional versus non-functional hypertrophy. But you're going to get more of the non-functional, meaning you're going to get more of the supportive structure than you are the actual active myosin, the contractile proteins in the muscle. Is that a bad thing? Well, in a young athlete, no. Because the young athlete, anything's going to work and anything's going to be beneficial. Right? What I mean by that is, in the weight room, any type of training is going to see positive results because they're a blank slate. Okay, if you can outwork their growth curve, you're going to see positive results. Like, they're going to get stronger just by getting older. But if you do anything on top of that, they're going to get even stronger. Okay, and I've seen this when I've worked with kids. Anything works, and so that's a positive thing. You can do 1x20, and they're going to get stronger, and they're going to get bigger if they need size. That's a positive development. They may not get as strong as they could if they did another type of training down the road, but initially works really well. Those are definite positives. And I see many young athletes and coaches pushing athletes into heavy loading when they don't need to. Remember, there's always a risk reward, and especially with biological young athletes, they've never had a barbell on them before. And I've recently put a video about, I don't think a barbell is an appropriate training device for a young athlete unless they're in a barbell sport, because you can do training, you can structure training in such a way you don't need the barbell and get the same results. I'm not saying the barbell is important. I love clean, snatch, and all those type of things. They can teach them coordination and all this. But in terms of loading the athlete with the purpose of getting them stronger, there's safer ways to do it. Even a hex bar, yes, it loads the athlete, but it's a safer way of doing it than the barbell. And so I would agree with Dr. Yessis in this respect that doing, like a circuit of 20 exercises, which is quite a bit. This is very Russian, by the way. Like, the Russians would do a lot of exercises early, and then in your GPP, right, and then move to your special preparatory phase, and you narrow the exercises down to more sport-specific movements. But this general preparatory prepares all the musculature, from your calves to your biceps, right? Your biceps brachii. I mean, everything is prepared. And so then when you load the athlete, they're ready for it. And I would agree with that. Think about your typical junior high team, whatever sports team that is, that would be a good approach if you have the equipment. Even if you don't have machines, if you have dumbbells and you feel confident in teaching these athletes very safe movements like a dumbbell goblet squat, right, and doing some band work and some other things, or a TR. I mean, those are all things you could do 1x20 and get results. The athletes will be safe in the weight room and when in the manner they're training, and they're going to get results that show up in their sports performance, and you prepare the athlete for later in life. Meaning that you're not just trying to get super jacked athletes in junior high, even though they're going to get stronger. You're thinking also ahead by the time they get through high school when they are loading heavy, maybe their body has been prepared for that, and you didn't damage them before they even got to high school. So those are the positives. The negatives, if you look at 1x20, 20 exercises are just 20. If you have 3 exercises for the quads, that's still 3 sets of 20 for the quads. Now, I know the idea is, well, you hit the quads differently, but it's still 3 sets of 20 for the quads. I'm not arguing that, different exercises hit muscles differently, but it's still 3 sets potentially of something. So it's not like one set is magical per se. It's still accumulated volume. And so, the rotation of the exercises, I don't think it needs to be as high as 20, and I just don't think it's practical in some cases. But I do agree that the number of exercises should be higher. I think 1x20 is excessive, and Dr. Yessis talks about starting out at a lower number, perhaps 1x14, and building out. And technical failure is the failure, not true failure. But still, you're just going to accumulate fatigue when you do this type of work. And if 10 is as good as 20, why not do 20? And he points this out. He says it could have been 3x19 or 3x21, or excuse me, one set of 19, one set of 21. 20 was a little bit arbitrary. It's just kind of in that range towards endurance, if we leave that. It's just enough stimulus for both the strength and the hypertrophy world and the aerobic world that you get, the idea is to get a little bit of all those worlds. But I think 20 is a bit high. And a lot of the times with young athletes, they lose interest in the set. So, even if you did 20 reps, but you did 2x10, you would get better results doing that with a shorter rest period because they would maintain their focus during the set. An older athlete, sure, they could do that, but still, it takes a lot of focus to do 20 good reps, like good reps. It takes focus. You can't be distracted and not be invested in the process. That's one of the downsides. Certainly, I mentioned already that if you're trying to get faster, and Dr. Yessis is going to address this, to be fair, that you can't just do 1x20. That'll be like a non-functional kind of hypertrophy, right? It's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. You're going to get bigger muscles. It's great for connective tissue. But at some point, you got to lift heavy weights and move fast in order to lift heavy weights and move fast. That's just the way it works. And so the 1x20 has its limitations there. So if you're more of a, he says beginner and intermediate, it's a good idea. I wouldn't disagree with that. If you start to eclipse the intermediate point, it's probably better to start go ahead and loading. And an athlete's general structure, this is where I could see its value, and I think many have used it, is, it's part of an annual plan or a 12-week cycle. This could be an early 1 to 2 week cycle that you do to prepare the body. What Lombo used to call tissue prep, anatomical adaptation phases for 2 weeks or so to make sure the body's ready before you load it. And I absolutely agree with that. I don't know if I do 1x20. I haven't done 1x20, but doing high rep type of work is a great idea. It doesn't have to be with the barbell, even for barbell athletes, right? For 2 weeks, you can put the barbell down or just do some technique work with the snatch, clean and jerk, let's say, if we're thinking weightlifting. You don't need a back squat all year round, okay? Now, will you spend a lot of the year squatting? Yes. But do you need to back squat all the time? No. In fact, give your back a break. If you've read The Gift of Injury by Stuart McGill, there's a great case study about how that lower back can actually heal, though. But you have to give the lower back time to heal and decompress. You can't just smash it, year round. You can, but, eventually the back is going to need some recovery time. I know many try to do that with the Squat Everyday program, but you can do that for a stretch. And yes, you get stiffer and all these different things, but you need to let the back recover, especially if you put a bar on it all the time. So, positive and negatives, it has a place. It's a tool. Think of it that way, just like any of these programming tools. If you just rely on it alone and become a 1x20 person, that's where I think a lot of these coaches struggled in the strength conditioning world in the 90s when they were using this. It's not a good idea. But if you use it as a tool, as a place in a cycle, or understanding who you're working with, hey, these young kids, maybe high volume type of stuff with lots of exercises, that might be better for their long-term development, and they're going to get stronger anyway, so why not do something like that where I don't have a high degree of technical proficiency that's needed by the athletes? That's be wise in our exercise selection. Then as the athlete gets older, or you're in a training cycle, you're trying to ramp up towards, a field court sport athlete or weightlifting or powerlifting, whatever it is, where something, requires a lot of maximal output or dynamic output or both, then you can start to move to that after you've built this base that a 1x20 like type of program could provide. So I think that's the real benefit. It's worth taking a look at the book. I mean, it's a simple book. It's 1x20. I mean, it's not terribly complex, but it does shine the light on, I think, that's why I talked about it here, the issue of loading athletes too quickly, both in their training cycle and in their training life. If you found this video helpful, like the video. Leave a comment below if you agree or disagree with me. And, of course, subscribe to my channel. Always releasing information in this area. Strength conditioning, sports performance, you name it. Nutrition science, all kinds of stuff. We'll be releasing videos all the time. Also hit the notification bell as well, so you know when I put up a new video. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video.